think back to when you were in high school, sitting in those neat little rows, raising your hand to use the washroom. And there were probably so many times you thought, when in the world anything that I'm learning will ever be relevant in my life? Now, for me personally, high school was tough. You see, growing up, I'd always been considered smart. But as school got more difficult, and I really didn't respond with more effort, actually, I didn't even know if I could respond with more effort, my grades got worse and worse, which wasn't too much of a problem for me until it was time to decide what I was going to do after high school. I had friends that had plans to go to college or university or whatever, and I had nothing lined up. I mean, I didn't want to come back for another year of high school, but I didn't know what else I was going to do. I see this exact same insecurity in many of my students. Students who have plans or vision of themselves to do amazing things, but first of all, don't even know what's out there for them, let alone feeling confident in their ability to go after their dreams. We need to make a shift in education for the adolescent student. We need to make a shift, and I think that we need to make a shift in 3 major ways. The first is we need to expose our students to some of the amazing things that are happening within their community. Give them a vision of the future. The second is that we have to give them the confidence to go after their vision of the future, teach them the skills of what I call self-efficacy. And then finally, we need to give them a push in that direction, knowing that they're going to fail, but don't see failure as a negative, but as an important step along their journey. So going back to myself in high school, honestly, I felt like I knew like 5 jobs back then. You know, with this idea in mind, I was thinking a few years ago, how do I expose my kids to some of the incredible innovations that are taking place in the Kitchener-Waterloo region? I mean, the KW region is one of the fastest growing tech sectors of all of Canada, so how do I expose my kids to that? With these ideas in mind, in the summer of 2017, some colleagues and me from my old high school, St. Mary's High School in Kitchener, developed an idea which eventually became Innovation Week, which has taken place at St. Mary's over 4 years, right up into the pandemic. So Innovation Week consisted of 3 different parts. The first is we brought in prominent people from the area to come give presentations and tell their story. The second is there were fun lunchtime activities for students to do. And finally, there were several workshops in a variety of fields that students could sign up for in lieu of going to a particular class. Drone development, computer programming, video game design. I mean, in my opinion, what could be more valuable if you're a budding engineer than going to a workshop run by 2 engineers from Arion Labs and actually getting a chance to build a drone? The feedback that we got from students at the end of Innovation Week was always overwhelmingly in favor of having it on a yearly basis. Because I think they really appreciated the opportunity to see what was out there and interact with these leaders on a more personal level. You know, when I first came up with the idea of Innovation Week, I thought the biggest challenge is going to be convincing some of these people, these leaders, these entrepreneurs, these innovators, to come to our school. Because why would they? I mean, think about it from their perspective. Why are you giving up time in the middle of your week with definitely no financial gain, no real networking opportunities, and often having to develop a workshop from scratch? So I asked them, why? And when I posed this question to them, I got a few different responses. The first is that, you know, they either had children that were adolescent age or they knew children that are adolescent age and they just thought it's a cool age, it's a neat age. The others said they wanted to get more involved in the community and weren't sure how, and this would be a great way. And those are great answers. But by far, the most common answer was this, is that these leaders, these innovators, these entrepreneurs remember seeing themselves in high school, perhaps sitting in some boring grade 10 science teacher's class, wondering when in the world any of this is going to be relevant to their lives, and they wanted to help that version of themselves. So once we give our students a good idea of what's out there and give them a vision for their future, how do we help prepare them and give them the confidence that they need? How do we teach them the skills of self-efficacy that they'll need for their future? You know, over 50 years ago, self-efficacy was first defined as an individual's belief in his or her ability to elicit a behavior that will lead to a performance attainment. How do we effectively teach our adolescent students, our high school students, some of these skills, some of these characteristics, such as grit, self-discipline, developing a growth mindset. I mean, how can we effectively teach these rather than just tell them, be gritty? Because honestly, I know, I've tried that before. When I first learned about growth mindset over 10 years ago, I thought, this is it. This is the answer to education. Now, if you're not aware, growth mindset, you kind of see your brain like a muscle, continuously growing and changing. And the more that you use it, the more you challenge yourself, the larger it gets. While the opposite, having a fixed mindset, you see your traits, your characteristics, your IQ as fixed. Now, me personally, I had a very fixed mindset in high school. I never went outside my comfort zone. And I never would raise my hand in class, even if I was like 95% sure of an answer, because I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to challenge that belief of me being smart. So if I can teach my students to develop a growth mindset, it'll save them a lot of the trouble that I experienced when I was in high school. So that following summer, I got excited. I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Philosophy of Success. And I wanted to prove both to myself and to my colleagues that growth mindset was the answer. So I set up a little experiment. I had some grade 9 science classes that coming year, and in half of those grade 9 science classes, I taught specific growth mindset training for almost the entire semester for about 10 or 15 minutes a week. You know, the idea of grit, the idea of neuroplasticity. And in my other science class, I just show a science video during that time. And my expectation was that the group that got the growth mindset would improve both academic performance as well as their enjoyment of science. But after the entire year of collecting data all along, I can find that I really didn't notice a difference between the two. Anecdotally, I can say when I first began to talk about growth mindset with my students, their eyes lit up. They were so excited. But then by week 8, week 9, week 10, I'd say, okay, guys, time for our growth mindset training. There'd be a lot more eye rolls and a lot more, here we go again. Now, does that mean that I don't believe this is something that could be valuable in the curriculum? Absolutely not. I talk about these ideas all the time. But what that concept taught me is that we have to figure out a better way to embed these ideas in the curriculum. And I know many ways that this can happen, but one way that I've found a lot of success with is through the use of storytelling. You know, we as a species have been telling stories for thousands of years. We're absolutely hardwired for them. So if we can effectively tell stories to our students both inside the classroom as well as outside, not only can we engage them, but we can pass on some of these value messages that we want to pass on to them. Let me give you an example from my grade 9 science class. So every year I'll talk about the periodic table and its founder, Dmitry Mendeleev. But whenever I do, I will always talk about Dmitry's mother, Maria. Now, if you don't know the story, I'll give you a very abbreviated version here. Maria Mendeleev lived in 18th century Russia, and she had 10 children, with Dmitry being the youngest. And she underwent some great hardships. Death of her husband, the burning down of the family business. Probably greater hardships than you'd even expect in 18th century Russia, which would probably be a lot anyways. But despite these problems, she's committed to giving her children the finest education that they had at the time. So with the older kids out of the house, she packed up her meager belongings and traveled 1,500 kilometers on horseback through the Ural Mountains with Dmitry in tow. Her goal? The University of Moscow. And it was there she was hoping to find anyone to take him on as a pupil. And it must have been the most arduous and dangerous journey ever, and I'm sure there are times she didn't think she would make it. But against all odds, she got there. And upon looking around for someone to take him on as a pupil, she was rejected. But do you think she gave up? No, she got back on her horse and traveled another 700 kilometers directly north to the University of St. Petersburg. And it was there she was able to find someone to take Dmitry on. And within 3 days of hearing this news, she succumbed to tuberculosis and died. I mean, what are the lessons that we can learn from Maria's story? Grit, perseverance, overcoming failure. These are the ideas we're trying to teach our students, and storytelling is the perfect medium for that. Not only that, but the idea of equity and inclusion has become a major priority for almost every school board across the entire province, and rightfully so. Students need to be able to see themselves in their learning and relate to it. And if we can become better storytellers and effectively tell stories of these prominent ethnic minorities, such as George Washington Carver or John Bennett Harrington, then we can not only have our students relate to their learning because they see someone that looks like them, but we can also pass along these incredible messages that they are to pass along. Okay, so going back to Maria's story for a second, I want to talk about the idea of failure. Because in education, failure is seen as a very negative thing. You know, because let's face it, failures cost money. But there is also some circles that say like failure is, you know, can hurt student self-esteem, and I couldn't agree with that less. I mean, think about anyone that's ever done anything of any value, and you'll know that they failed over and over and over again. So it's not the failure that's the problem. It's the, what's the next step? It's not seeing failure as something to be avoided, but perhaps even something to be celebrated and as a stepping stone to your greatness. I learned this lesson from the most influential student in my career. His name was Alex, near the beginning of my teaching career. Now, back in those days, I wanted respect. Actually, no, I demanded respect. I was one of those teachers, well, there's a saying in education, don't let them see you smile till November. That was me. And Alex was in one of those early classes and came with a lot of baggage. I mean, not that he was a behavioral issue, he's just so apathetic about everything. I mean, I remember phoning his grandma, who was his legal guardian, the second week of the semester. You could tell from the conversation, she didn't know how to deal with him either. Well, about a month in the year, Alex began to have some trouble, and then basically kind of just stopped coming in class. And soon enough, I couldn't reach him or his grandma anymore. And I thought, okay, I guess that's it. Unfortunately, I've seen this from time to time. Students will come for a bit and then basically just drop off the face of the planet. So I thought this was the case with him. Until that following year, right before the year began, there was a late addition to my class list. Alex. But you know what? He didn't come last year as a grade 9, so why would he come this year as a grade 10? So I began my class as I always do. First day, Alex wasn't there, you know. Make sure that you're signing out to use the washroom. Make sure that you're following all procedures. And about 10 minutes into class, what do I hear from behind me in the doorway? What's up, Stevie B? I look, and there's Alex there. Big goofy grin on his face, right? So of course, I had to get my even more stern teacher face on, right? And I had to go talk to him in the hall. And you know what? Alex, he understood that that wasn't appropriate. And Alex came to class and he worked that year. I mean, he wasn't getting 90s or whatever, but he was doing enough. And I learned a lot about him. I learned that his father had been in and out of his life for years, and that his mother was battling a drug addiction. And I got a chance to talk to him about some of the things I've talked about here today, about some of those skills, about failure and the importance of overcoming failure. Well, after Alex passed my class, I didn't think about him very much. You know, just here and there. I'd see him in the halls, and other than a wave and a small how you doing, etc. We didn't really communicate that much. And I didn't think very much about him until a few years later. I was actually inviting a new cohort of grade 9 students into my room, and what do I hear from behind me in the hallway? What's up, Stevie B? It's like I knew who it was before even looking around, right? But there he was, Alex, same big goofy grin on his face, high school graduate, starting a career in construction. And then he held out his hand to me and said, Mr. Bryson, thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And I remember thinking to myself, Alex, I really don't know how much I actually did believe in you. But you never do know your impact. Okay, so I'm getting near the end of my talk, and I just want to say there are some shifts that we need to make in education, especially at the adolescent level, especially at the high school level. We need to expose our kids to some of the amazing things that are happening in your community, and I think that if you enlist the help of people from that community, they'll be more than willing to help you. We need to give them the confidence by teaching them the skills of self-efficacy and teaching them the skills that are going to help them be successful both now and in their future. And then finally, we need to give them a push, know that they will fail, but at the same time knowing that failure isn't something to be avoided, but it's just a step along their journey to greatness. If we can do that, we can prepare our students as well as we can for the next step in their life. We can take a student, high school, feeling insecure and insignificant, and turn them into literal superheroes. Thank you very much.